Hello and welcome to the Resilient Kid podcast with me, Ash Costello, psychotherapist of over 25 years. I have a guest today, very excited, Helen Davis from Practical Wisdom, we only met recently. And I was really, really excited because a lot of kind of parents and people that are coming through my therapy service are absolutely, recognizing traits in their children and recognizing traits in themselves. And just before we kind of hit record, Helen and I were having a conversation about that. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, Helen, welcome. Can you introduce yourself to the lovely listeners,
Yeah,
please?
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Helen Davis and I'm the founder of Practical Wisdom. It is a not for profit organisation that supports neurodivergent adults and the organisations they are in. And that could be adulting, because that's a little tricky, parenting, and also trying to help organisations be neurodivergent friendly, inclusive. So that's the kind of thing that we do with Practical Wisdom.
Brilliant. And one of the conversations we just had off air, because we were getting quite excited to hit record, was that a lot of parents now, there's lots of kids
Mm,
that are, you know, we're recognizing traits because I think one, we're all more aware of neurodivergent traits and
yeah.
needs and behaviors. So there's lots of that happening for kids, but actually a lot of the parents, and I told you a little story about, as we're recognizing that, the mums and dads are going, hold on a minute, I do that. So do you see a lot of that, Helen?
Yeah, no, we definitely see it, a lot of that. And also, I think it's because when we were at school, it wasn't always recognised. There wasn't the same, like you said, the awareness has increased, so there wasn't the same knowledge. Unfortunately, a lot of people might have experienced being told they were too lazy, or like pull your socks up, or whatever it was. Um, and you kind of learnt to mask, and then at different points in your life, you might realize you actually are neurodivergent for whatever reason, whether it's a new job, it can be a relationship, or indeed being a parent. And then you notice, oh, I've got all those traits. When they're saying at school, that your kid might have ADHD traits or autistic spectrum disorder or, whatever the neurospiciness is. So it's really common, but it's a bit of a shock, to be honest, because then you realize they've got it and I think I do. And where do I go from here? What, well, that's completely changed how I look back on my life.
Mhm.
And I also need to help and support my child now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really difficult. I mean, I think there's one thing there a term that you use that I really love is, did you say transition points? When you were
Mhm.
talking about kind of getting a new job or,
Yeah.
when your kid gets diagnosed or menopause we spoke about before,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I love that idea of actually those transition points are really highlight when you're
Yeah.
struggling and can highlight that. So I think that's a really
Definitely.
good thing. But the other thing is what you've just said, which I think is really important, is it's not just about trying to support our kids, but actually
Mm.
now you've got to cope when life just suddenly looks different. It's like almost,
Mhm.
Alice in Wonderland, looking through a completely different
Yeah.
glass, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know about you, but it's really common for parents to always put their child first and forget their needs. But actually, you almost can't, because you suddenly have to reframe everything, and you're trying to support your child. So, I think one of the key things I always say to people, particularly parents, basically, is that self-care is not selfish, and that you also need to look after yourself. And there's nothing stopping you both being on a journey where you explore together, and depending how old they are, that you both know that. That's okay too. Because also you're then like giving permission to your child to understand that you can learn things together as well. Sometimes I think there's a lot of pressure as a parent to be the perfect parent, and actually I think we shouldn't let sort of perfect get in the way of good. Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of my things that I bang on about to my parents that come to see me is that we only, according to science, we
Mm.
only have to get this parenting malarkey right 30% of the time and they'll still turn out okay. You
I
know,
know.
and I think
It's amazing, isn't it?
that's it is. It's such a relief, you know, for some parents. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
Instagram parenting. But I think you're
Mm.
so right with that, that
Yeah.
actually we know, as particularly as mums, you know,
Mm.
I think if I'm not in a good space, the house is not in a good space, you know,
Yeah.
whether that is for, you know, is dinner going to come out, is the house upside down, is it, what
Mhm.
about the kids? So we have to make sure that we look after, you know,
Yeah.
ourselves first, because we've got to give a bit of ourselves away
Mhm.
to our kids, so actually to make sure that we are good, in a good space.
Yeah, and I don't think it's based in science, but I certainly know that whenever I'm not on form, like, I think that's when my son knows and goes up a gear. It's like, "Why would you do that now?" Whereas he's been, like, fine all week.
Yeah.
And so also I think it's because they're unsettled. So I think it's also by making sure you are okay, um, and being kind to yourself, you're also helping bring things like down a level,
Mhm.
which I think is important too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of tips and kind of strategies do you
Mm,
recommend for parents, particularly parents who are, you know, maybe facing a, you know, whether they go for diagnosis or they just recognize that they might be
mhm.
neurodivergent? What kind of things do you, I was going to say to make life easier, but Helen, I'm not
Yeah,
sure that's always the way, but
no.
certainly to help out.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things because one thing that is particularly coming up because we're supporting people on the waiting list for autism and ADHD at the moment, it's really obvious the high level of negative self-talk in
Mm,
our heads. So one of the things is about being kind to yourself and like the way you speak to yourself. Would you speak to your child in that way? And you probably wouldn't. So I think a certain amount of self-kindness. Also, it's okay to look for strategies that would actually really give you a hand. So it depends what your neurospicy flavor is. So for some, like having a set routine takes where you don't even have to think that, you know, this is what you do on a Monday or Tuesday, that kind of helps. If you're prone to like memory issues, I'm shockingly bad. Um, I have two bank accounts because I know I'm going to lose a debit card. There's no maybe, it's just when. So it's what do you regularly come up against that you can have a specific strategy on? So that might mean that you need a certain routine so you don't have to think. That might be that if you're going to lose things, you always have a spare set of keys, for example, with a neighbor. Um, you know, that you have different things like that in place. For some people, it would be about being kind to yourself, actually remembering to take a break. Um,
mm,
Also, stop trying to be, like I said, the perfect parent and also fit with your natural rhythm. So some of us are morning people, like we are, and other people are more like night owls. So why would you do all the most difficult things at the opposite end of the day, which don't fit with you?
mhm,
It's okay to what I like to say, own your weird. It's all right to be different because truthfully, behind closed doors, people are all, you know, there's a lot of uniqueness, not this Instagram world which looks perfect, which is lovely. And so realizing that other people haven't got it perfect, taking the pressure off yourself a little bit, and just seeing what are the specific things, reach out to various organizations. um, there are things out there, but I've noticed that they can be quite difficult to find, which is why I'm trying to put more and more resources on the practical wisdom site so that we can actually help people. Um, so it does depend on your type of neurodiversity. If you've got dyspraxia, so I break things all the time. I only buy wooden ornaments now. And it's because I know I'm going to break them. And I did have a chat, you know, the other afternoon. just don't get offended if I break something you buy. So you kind of also manage expectations. Now, the other really important thing is if you look at your family, there's a high chance it's a whole family thing of neurospiciness. So you might, but it won't present in the same way. So you need to find ways that you can live in harmony together, because sometimes somebody who wants freedom and somebody who likes order might be in the same household, and that's like fire and water. So instead of trying to create this perfect compromise, find ways that you can take turns, or ways that you can actually, know whose need is higher at
Mm.
different points. So like, you want to try people not to completely spin out, because once they have, then it's harder to sort. But further down the line is when you want to, so you don't want to be at breaking point when you ask for help. So try and, if you can, think of what is your challenges before that and what you can actually get the support on.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Because I think, well, first of all, you kind of giving support on your website, which is, I'll put in the show notes, which is practicalwisdom.uk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
but I'll put all the details to find Helen and stuff in the show notes anyway. But actually, I find that, and I love that you say neurospiciness. That's just brilliant. But actually, I find that trying to get that information
Mm,
is difficult, and then that's a barrier. And if you have
yeah.
got any neurodivergent traits, you're going to give up before then anyway, most of the time.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think the fact that you're kind of spotlighting those areas where you can get help, or maybe charities that help, absolutely
Yeah.
is brilliant. But I think that's really important, because I find it, managing expectations is a big one,
Mm,
especially with grandparents who, you know I've had it with clients where grandparents have got these huge expectations, and when they've started talking, actually granddad's probably neurodivergent as well.
yeah.
He's done it in such a way that it's my
Mm,
way or the highway kind of thing. And I talk to parents all the time about teachers and parents, grandparents or aunties and uncles, talk about what their
mm,
expectations are, and how, we're never going to live up to that, because their
mhm.
expectations and what your kid wants to do are two very, vast
Yeah.
different ideas. So I think the expectations is a really, really good kind of top
Yeah.
tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And also because if you're, so for example, if your autistic child doesn't like surprises, Christmas can be proper stressful for them, and then therefore you. And my son definitely has like autistic traits, and he he said to me, I don't like surprises actually. And so we've got an agreement that like, if it is a surprise, say like Christmas, it's from a certain list of things.
Mhm.
Because otherwise he's like, "Well, I didn't want that, and that's not on my list." And he's not being rude. He's actually being factual, because he like, "Well, if it's meant to be a gift and a present, why would you get me something I actually don't want to do or have?" And it's proper stressful Christmas is because of the mixed expectations and this perfect family, like how you're meant to be.
Do you know
Mm,
what though? I absolutely love that. That should be kind of just life goals. Why do we think that we are the experts when we're buying
yeah,
a gift for somebody else? Do you know what I mean?
well,
That to me, I don't know what your son's called, but I absolutely love it. And it's going to kind of, excuse me, be a little kind of rule now. I might say, why would you
yeah,
buy me something that's not on my list? Yeah, I like that. That's so cool.
yeah. It's actually very funny because so I've ADHD traits and he's got we're literally fire and water in different, and we can't compromise. I've got to own that. So we take turns because I literally do not want to watch, but that might not be just a neurospicy thing. But like for example, I might not want to watch, something about anime for the hundredth time yet again. But I will if that's our allotted thing, and therefore he gets to be dragged around, walking around the Brighton lanes. That's my thing.
Yeah.
And so it also, and we've got obviously a neurospicy friends, and because we do like to hunt in packs. So
Mhm.
like, so also it works with the other kids as well, and then they can get their head around that. That's a rule that they can get. And for like ADHD people who are impulsive and stuff like that, you can also make sure that they get a bit of freedom, because the other thing is, if you're like an autistic child or adult, Christmas, if you're meant to go around to a relative's and it's like dead boring, sorry anyone, but sometimes it's really boring. Like, what can you actually do to make it more interesting for the kid other than the tablet? Obviously, that's a quick win, but slightly addictive. But there are other things, like, can you actually in advance say, like, um, Alice really likes to play Monopoly. Can we do that? Because the other thing is, we're also expecting children to conform to the adult expectations. And I think adults think that they need to be a certain way.
Mm.
So it's like, that's why I talk about adulting a lot, is because it's okay to have fun. It's okay to be silly. And actually, if you're just serious all the time, that's what you're teaching your kid. So I always think it's no one's an adult is the truth. I think we just learnt to mask more and more and more, and how to be socially acceptable. So I also
Mm.
think permission to have fun it is actually really important, and have a laugh. And that's why I also say about how you do your thing, because each family behind closed doors, like I've been in this for 35 years, when you go into people's homes, they have their own ways of doing things. There's different standards of how you keep your, how you like your furniture, how tidy you are, and different things like that. If you're an ADHD person, by the way, if you put it in a cupboard, as soon as you shut it, we have object permanence issue. It doesn't exist, right? So I can't show you right, but I have open, like, we're in my kitchen. I have open plan shelving. Thank God. It's the first time I've done that. I can find things now. Because I literally, all I do all the time is open a cupboard, trying to guess which cupboard it's in. So it's like how to live your life, how you want, that actually is a match with you, instead of how you think you should be, because that's what Instagram told you, or even your family. Because, like you were saying about the grandparents, is like there's a certain expectations that's
Helen,
impossible. Yeah,
Helen,
sorry.
sorry. You just dropped out then for a
Oh
second.
no, sorry.
No, it's all right. I'll edit it so it's not an issue.
Oh, okay.
What where you was you said about oh, what was it now? I was just writing down what the thing was and it's gone out of my head. It was about the cupboard.
The cupboard, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
said you put stuff in a cupboard and then that was it. It went. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
that's
I put stuff in a cupboard, and as soon as I shut the door, it doesn't exist. I literally have no idea what's in the cupboard. And so for myself, having a kitchen that's open plan, and that actually have open shelving, it may not look nice and neat for other people, but for me, I can find stuff quickly. It's so much easier, it's so much faster, it's less stressful. My son's room used to be that, and then we said, wouldn't it be nice if we put like little doors and everything? So because we got those, little cube boxes that we all get, because we do love IKEA. But I have no idea where anything is now, though, and it's really hard because I'm like, literally, can we not put like a little picture in front of it so I'll know? So there's object permanence is a real problem for people who have, some executive function issues, particularly ADHD. And so, like, you, it is okay to create your home in a way that functions for you, whatever that be,
absolutely.
really. Mm.
Absolutely. And I think that's I'm smiling to myself because we have literally just uh, bought IKEA wardrobes for the kids that the
Okay.
hubby is fitting in, and they've got these beautiful sliding doors on them. And I said yesterday, "Can we buy a label maker?" And they were
Yes.
like the kids just looked at me and went, "Why?" And I said, "Because
Oh,
like I'd really like you and me to know socks go in that drawer." And it was just one of them because actually mine is
yeah.
kind of almost the opposite, that if I give like here's your washing returned, go and put it away. If I walk
Mm.
in and open their wardrobes and it's all a mess, it gets me a little bit stressed out. And I think
Yeah.
because then I feel like I've got the responsibility to tidy up. I will not be doing it, by the way. I will fight that urge and I'll make them do it. But it is that if I know and they know socks going there, then it just takes out the argument, the sting, whatever you want to call it. So it's like, for me, it's brilliant. But one of the things I wanted to say to you is, we do often have our homes for guests. We do not
Yeah,
have guests every day. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's got to be
absolutely.
practical and functional for the
Yeah,
family that actually live in it, not for your, your Christmas Day
yeah,
guests.
absolutely. I have to say though, I do like guests coming round. One, because it's when I'll tidy, but and suddenly my little ADHD hyperfocus will kick in. Is like, oh yeah, this is very funny, right? On my on my 50th birthday, 2 days before, true ADHD fashion, I was like, let's whitewash the floor. I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought it was a brilliant idea. So there I was, like 2 days trying to put like the white varnish and stuff on the wooden floor. And it said 2 coats. What it meant was 12. So I also had to keep getting up in the middle of the night to do the next layer so that it would dry in time for the next layer before the party. Yeah, that's a classic ADHD to do.
Yeah, it's funny actually. My hubby is he's got massive Irish family, and a couple of cousins came over, and they walked into the house and went, "Oh my goodness!" Like, because they'd never been before, and we've built our own house. Anybody who listens to the podcast will know we built our own house, and yeah. And they walked in and they went, "Oh my goodness, it's like really tidy." And I was thinking, "You cheeky," and I went, "What do you mean?" And what they actually meant is it was quite minimalistic, because
Yeah,
they said tidy. So I thought, "Oh, you meant, what did you think we were scruffy? Did you think it was
yeah, yeah,
untidy?
yeah, yeah.
Is it in my
That's what you
head?" Because
heard. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And actually they said no, because actually there's a lot of particularly in their family, there's lots of stuff, like lots and
yeah,
lots of stuff. And I
yeah,
started laughing, and I said, "Oh, okay. Now I realize what you're saying." And so for me, it's because I don't have lots of stuff around, because that again would be a thing that I would go, "I need to tidy that." Or I'll
yeah,
get pile blindness if I don't sort it. It can sit
yeah,
there for ages because I don't see it anymore. So
yeah.
it's for me having to keep it quite
Yeah.
minimalistic. So
That
yeah.
that's such an interesting thing, and there's a lot of shame about tidiness around. So
Mm.
there is OCD is part of the neurospicy family too, and sometimes you can get a splattering of that with your other things, whether it's autism or ADHD. But or you can swing the other way and then keep a lot of stuff. And clutter is a particular, it's got psychological issues connected to it. You might have trouble. Like you keep everything because you've got a poor memory, for example, so that's like a memory hook to a nice time, or you've got executive function issue where you can't make a decision, you just don't know, do I get rid of it, or I might need to keep it, and there's a certain amount of anxiety that if I get rid of it, what if I get rid of it and I need it again. And yeah, there's quite a lot of psychology actually connected to tidiness, truthfully, and where even to start. So with ADHD, people is like, if you don't start, then you're just overwhelmed with it. And so like one of the techniques we have for people is we call it may as well. So if you like, you got one little, don't, stop looking at the whole room, just look at one little corner, say I may as well, instead of like I
Mm.
must do, like a gentler voice. And then you just start off with a little bit. And if you just get a little bit done, you're still winning. But it might, if your interest kicks in, you might end up doing much more than you planned. And so that's quite a common technique that works. And like a little bit often works for some people. Other people, they're much better to hyper focus and like blast it. But the first bit, getting started, can be tricky.
Yeah,
And yeah, going
absolutely.
from there.
I speak to a lot of students about who will procrastinate, or
Mm.
procrastinate, or procrastiscroll,
Yeah.
and um, research will show you that if you do something for 5 minutes, you're 80% more likely to
Hmm.
continue, if, like you say, your interest hooks you. Um,
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention OCD. So my mom was fanatical. Like she had OCD around cleaning and stuff.
Yeah,
And it's really
mine
funny
too.
because if we have visitors, I'll see it through Leslie. That's what I say. I see it through Leslie's eyes, because then I'm starting to look what visitors will see rather than,
Yeah.
me. But funny story, we used to have a Labrador and we had a sheepskin rug. You remember when they were a thing in the 80s?
Yeah.
And in front of the fire. And none of us walked on this rug because my mom would be like meticulous and she would shake it every day and fluff it up
Um,
and everything. And even our
yeah.
dog used to walk round this rug, like hilarious. Which is actually really funny. And it's kind of, I think I've maybe taken after mum a little bit on that. My sister's gone the
Yeah.
opposite because she just couldn't stand it. So yeah, funny.
Yeah,
So
I went
Helen,
the opposite.
we've got to go
Yeah.
one way or the other, haven't we?
Yeah.
Helen, tell us, why would somebody come to you? Why, like, what kind of things would they come to you with?
Yeah, so at the moment we've got like 4 programs that we're offering. One is to help with planning and organizing, harnessing your emotions, like because some of us, like me, feel big. The other one is about increasing attention and focus. And interestingly, you can actually do a lot if you focus on something called your vestibular system. So basically, physical exercise is going to increase your attention and focus if, even just after a couple of weeks. We're doing that, and also improving your sleep. So at the moment, there are the 4 main courses that we'll run. Um, I'm always interested in what people need and want. So the other thing is I'm quite approachable. If ever somebody thinks like, I really need this, could you create something for that? I would, because I'm more than happy to do that. So we've started with those, and they're really well. We used to do Parent Thrive, so that will be coming back maybe December or January. And that is a little bit about what I said about self care, about giving that a go, along with practicing gratitude and different things like that. And that's going to be low cost or free thing that we're going to be developing as well. Because I think parents, we, you know, we, we need to kind of leave feeling guilty all the time for actually having a rest. So yes, that's another one we'll be developing. We're also going to be looking in the new year about talking about the challenges of parenting. It's People don't like to talk about it, but for example, when your child hits you,
Mm.
like everyone seems to talk the other way, but actually there's quite a few cases where kids act out, and how to deal with that can be really difficult. And I've heard a lot of parents talk about that. But obviously, we want to make sure we get that robust and right. So that's something that will be coming out as well next year.
Excellent. That's brilliant. And what we'll do is we'll put you, because I know you're on Facebook and stuff like that.
Mm,
So we'll put all your socials in the show notes.
thanks.
And yeah, is there anything that, as we finish, Helen, that you want to
Mm,
say to kind of parents out there, adults out there? I love the
yeah,
term adulting, because I think, when it comes to bills and feeding everybody and stuff like that, yes, we've got to
mm,
be adults, but actually, I think a lot of the time we miss out on the fun sometimes. So yeah,
yeah,
I love what you said about that. But is there
yeah,
anything that you want to kind of just share before we finish?
yeah. The last thing is message to anyone who's feeling a bit insecure, and and worried that they're not doing enough, not are enough. Just to say you are good enough, and it's okay not to know things. It's all right that you got parent L plates on. Remember, you are good enough, and it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important and strong message to give
Mm,
out to parents, because it is hard. It's the hardest job in the world. Helen and I,
yeah.
are both parents. We've been doing our job for a long, long time. Parenting, I don't know if you'll agree, Helen, is still the hardest job I ever do, because our kids
Oh,
push our
definitely.
buttons.
They do, and I was overconfident, like, because 'cause I'm a good nurse, right? I don't mind saying that. And I felt I can do, like, a long shift. I'm used to doing double shifts. I'm working with no sleep whatsoever, and I thought, "I have got this. I love kids, I'm brilliant with them." And then I had one, and I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
And it was the hardest thing I ever did, and I didn't feel equipped, and it was nothing like I thought. I always felt like it was a conspiracy, and I absolutely adore my son, I really do. But I felt like nothing had prepared me for how it really was, and I'm kind of struck like, why would you teach algebra but not parenting? You know, I just think that we need to start having honest conversations about, how parenting is, but also what really helps and what
Mm.
like resilience things you need to have in place and, the other practical things that make a difference. But that's a whole other session.
Whole other podcast. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Helen, for joining us today.
Like,
Everyone, you can check out the show notes. I'll give you all Helen's details in there, as well as where you can find me. But just please comment underneath the podcast or the video, however you're watching. If you've got any questions, and I would forward them to Helen. Take care, everyone. Thanks again, Helen, for joining us.
you're welcome.
Bye for now.
Bye.